Welcome to the Notorious HFL podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Lohman, the Notorious HFL on podcast and Huge Fat Loser on social media, on all social media platforms. Before we get into our amazing guest today, I have to thank my sponsors who make this all possible. My first sponsor is G2 Training. They're proud to offer a 15% discount to all the brothers and sisters in blue. For all you cops out there, police officers are near and dear to their hearts, and they're playing a part in working and preserving their physical health or priority. The G2 training owners are George Mifsud. If you're in the police community, especially the NYPD, you know who George is. If you recognize his picture, you recognize his name, it's probably because he's still very active in the NYPD community. He's been an instructor for over 17 years with the Key Promotional School, helping people get promoted, including myself. He helps prepare them for the promotional exams. He's a retired captain. He's also chairman of the board for the directors of the Finest Financial Credit Union. Throughout his 25-year career with the NYPD, he's seen firsthand many co-workers, younger and older, battling serious medical conditions and death, having to live unfulfilling and stressful lives. Now he has the opportunity to play a part in helping out others through G2 training and physical fitness training. If you've seen George's own transformation, it's pretty amazing, to be honest with you. The other trainer is Gregoria Meyer. She's worked for 17 years in the business of health and trained clients' minds and bodies. Clients make consistent weekly appointments, are led through exercises that strengthen the body inside and out, and are educated on the importance of nutrition and how living a balanced life is priceless. In 2020, her son embarked on a career in law enforcement and graduated with the COVID class and headed out to the streets of New York. And when so much was uncertain, through the protests, through all the stuff that we went through back in 2020, stress prevailed against a lot of police officers. And she saw it firsthand being his mother. So she wanted to make sure that everybody was taken care of. She's seen this firsthand, and giving the stress on the mind and body, career, exercise, and nutrition sometimes take a back seat. She wants to make sure that's a priority. This is a work in progress for him, as it's a work in progress for all of us, and she wants to play a part in helping you get right and live a long and healthy life. Make an appointment by showing up at G2. Give them a call or text them at 516-286-6300 to get started. That's 516-286-6300. They're located in Syosset. You save lives, we save lives too. The next person is Raymond Kenny, CPA. Get your taxes done, all right? Don't wait to the last minute. Get those taxes done, all right? This guy will hook you up. His phone number is 516-493-2967, 516-493-2967, or rkcpany.com, rkcpany.com. And our last sponsor, one of my best friends out there in the world, who runs one of the best organizations for first responders. His name is Frank Vos from Reps for Responders. What he does is he gives charity, scholarships to first responders when it comes to gyms, jiu-jitsu, mental health therapy. He helps hook cops up, first responders, military, EMS, fire, dispatchers, everybody with therapists and whatever else they need. And he has two events coming up. One is called the RFR Beefsteak event. It's in Jersey. It's on April 27th from 6 to 10 p.m. Limited seats are available. Essentially what it is, it's a big Jersey thing. I didn't realize what it was. They have steak, and instead of like having like a whole steak, they slice up pieces of steak and they put it on like a piece of bread, and they give it out to everybody, and it's like an all-you-can-eat type of steak buffet type thing. All right, so April 27th, 6 to 10 p.m. Good fundraiser for that. And the next thing is the roll call, which is April 26th, and that is at the Bergen County Police Academy. It's hosted by Reps for Responders and Echelon Front, which is Jocko Willing's company, and it's a good opportunity for members of the first responder community, specifically with leadership, to get together, talk about leading their organizations through the many struggles that we have these days. So it's a good way to check in. Make sure you go to repsforresponders.org to sign out and find out more information, or go to Reps for Responders on Instagram. Now, without further ado, here is Justin Szpilka. I always get confused on how to say your last name.
Okay.
All right,
It's okay.
I'm sure that's very common.
Yeah, and people get me and my brother confused all the time too. So
he is the founder, CEO, guru of Coastal MD, which is
integrative health and wellness. That's really what we specialize in. So we're just a different take on medicine now. Still rooted in a lot of evidence-based medicine, but open to more alternative modalities as well too.
Yeah, to be honest, so my story is I started my weight loss journey like 6 or so years ago. Now, I don't remember the exact date, but I was doing everything by the book, like naturally, eat less, exercise more, do all this stuff. If you would have told me about integrative medicine or hormone replacement therapy or any of this stuff, even then, because I had a different mindset, I was just beginning, I was like, I have no idea what this is, and I'm not doing that. And we'll get into that, what people think about it in a minute, but people may not know this about me. But when me and my wife started having kids, we had a little bit of trouble having kids at first, so I went to a
fertility specialist, or
it wasn't. It was a reproductive endocrinologist.
Okay,
right out in Suffolk County. I remember I drove all the way out there, and I had all my levels tested, and he came back to me. And he's like, listen, just so you know, for future reference, your testosterone level is around 187. Now, I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's like, your testosterone level is really low. And he straight up says to me, he goes, did you ever do any type of steroids? And I go, absolutely. Like, I barely even worked out up until like the last 2 years. So he's like, listen, I know you're trying to have kids now. So they put me on clomiphene at first, right? Because I was still trying to have kids. And then after my wife got pregnant, I came off of it and whatever. I never did anything, never followed up on it.
Yeah.
Then I went to a urologist later, and I just wasn't happy. And that's what led me essentially to you guys because of your reputation. And my whole outlook, especially talking about hormone replacement therapy, has changed drastically because I think there's this, as you can agree, like a giant stigma around it.
Huge. And I could talk for a while about that, because you look at it back 20 years ago, or even in the 80s, 90s, the only people doing testosterone were illicit. They was in the gym. It was people looking to get massive, right? Over the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years, that stigma is changing, right? And slowly but surely it's heading in a positive direction for everybody, because there is a safe way to do this. And recognizing that there is a need, like you're deficient in a hormone, we need to fill that back up, right? You do it with other things, your thyroid hormone's low, you take a medication, Synthroid, to bring your levels up. There's issues with insulin, and then have diabetics. What makes testosterone any different, right? And it's becoming very popular in the female space as well too, while adding estradiol, progesterone, all that type of stuff also. But we'll focus on male for today, because that's where I'm happy with, because people are getting great results, and there was, for a very long time, people didn't know why they were so fatigued, why they were gaining weight. And it's because testosterone's not normally checked in your regular physical, right? And I get stories all the time of, I asked my primary care to check it for me and they wouldn't do it.
No, it's very true. And not only when you talk about the physical aspect, I have people that I know, friends, who they don't even work out. And they'll be like, I was depressed for the last year, 2 years, and I went on hormone replacement therapy, and I felt the best I've ever felt in my entire life. And they don't, and because of the stigma of it, a lot of people aren't willing to do that. I really wish that they would. I really wish they'd look into it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that after the age of 30, it's proven that your testosterone starts to go on a decline, right? The rate at which that declines really varies on the person, and a lot of other factors that I could touch on as well too. But it happens over such a prolonged period of time that you kind of forget what it was like to be 18, 21, you know what I mean? When you're really peaking, you know what I mean? With your testosterone. And people don't really think of testosterone as being linked to so much to mood, right? The only stigma that testosterone has to mood is more so one of like the rage, negative, roid rage, right? But when you balance it out and you do it the right way, it's directly linked to depression, lack of motivation to go to the gym. I mean, that's a huge one. The exercises that you're going to get, you get people back into a healthy range. Now they're getting better pumps in the gym. They're looking forward to going to the gym. They're really doing as best as they can. Where before they were probably just going through the motions, So.
And unfortunately, what happens is, because of that stigma, what people do is, instead of actually going to see a specialist in it, they go grab an over-the-counter testosterone booster supplement, which I'm sure you could speak on. They don't work.
Yeah. Not only that, too, they're not regulated, right? So a lot of what I see is I'll do my comprehensive blood work, right? That's how we always start off. And I'm checking liver function, kidney function, vitamin levels, hormone levels, and they usually have next to no benefit in the testosterone department. And then their LFTs, their liver function is up. Sometimes their kidney function is taking a hit. And it's like, oh, well, I thought this was all natural and just like a normal way to boost. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't even know what's in there, you know? So that's a great point.
Yeah, I always say that, like, if you've ever taken one before, it essentially just makes you mad. So you think that it's working. It gives you way too much caffeine and like makes you very irritable. So you're like, oh, this is definitely working because this is the typical stereotype of testosterone is that it makes you mad, but it really doesn't. Honestly, I've been in a better mood now since I started hormone replacement therapy than I've probably ever been.
It makes you more even keel, right?
Sure.
Because if you're in a depressed mood or your mood is just lower, you're going to be more irritable, right? So it's going to be easier for you to snap, things like that. It's all about finding that sweet spot for you because then you're not overshooting, you're not undershooting, and you're going to really reap all the benefits, and that's something that a lot of people don't talk about that I'm glad you brought up first too, is mood. Most people focus on energy, gaining muscle, losing fat, stuff like that. But, something that I could also go into maybe later in the podcast or in a different one is like, what's the proper cycle? How do people do things? Because I've dealt with scary situations before where people either were doing it on their own or they were going to a different doctor and then they stopped going to them and they just cut cold turkey. Well, what happens when you cut cold turkey? You bottom out quickly, and they became severely clinically depressed. And that's where you have to titrate up, you have to titrate down. Hormones are not something that you could just add and subtract very easily.
Why would somebody just decide they're just not going to do it anymore?
Sometimes is that they don't like the provider that they're going to see, or sometimes money is of an issue, right? But there really is a proper way to do things, right? And those are just some of the instances that I've seen firsthand. But most people like yourself, once you're experiencing the benefits, doing it the right way, realizing you're within a safe realm, why aren't you going to continue to do it?
I just always wonder why somebody would quit cold turkey and just stop outright. Something that I'm grateful for that has really shifted in the fitness industry is there's obviously a lot of people who are not transparent, but there are a lot of people who are, who are genuinely honest, because you see these people out there and they're like, they admit to, what they've been on, what they've done, and what they have to do now. And you see a lot of these people who stopped taking a lot of things that they were taking before when they were doing this, and that now they're on hormone replacement therapy, and at least they're honest about what they're doing with that, because it gives a lot of great insight into, the differences of what a cycle of steroids might be and what HRT is. And I'm going to ask you that question. It's I want you to explain to them, what is the difference between what an average bodybuilder's cycle of steroids is and what HRT is?
Very good question, right? So hormone replacement therapy, think of that as like a chronic management plan, right? Usually some of the illicit use, right, that you're talking about, whether it's a bodybuilder or just somebody doing it recreationally at the gym, one, it's not regulated, right? So they're getting their stuff usually from someone offline or a buddy or a friend of a friend.
out of a bathtub?
Yeah. So, they think they know that it's good stuff, but you really don't. There's no log of it. There's no quality control checks, right? So that's one stigma is, all right, the product right away is bad. Then you're doing things that are extremely illicit, Deca, Tren, Anavar, different forms of testosterone that, testosterone as a whole is a controlled substance, right? So there's an anthate, propionate, cypionate, which cypionate is what we use. It's the most studied. It's the safest. It's the best to control, right? I could dial in really what we need to tweak with that. So that's really the difference, right? So these things like Deca, Tren, Anavar, they have so many other areas that they hit on, and they will actually cause more harm to other organ systems, right? Which they don't know is going on, right? And that's a big difference between doing HRT properly and doing it, as a bodybuilder or cycling on your own, because you don't have a medical professional usually checking in on your blood work, right? Because you may look aesthetically great, but then if I show you how your liver is functioning right now or how your kidneys are functioning, and you're like, holy crap, what the hell's going on? I had no idea. I get this all the time, right? And you just touched on it. Like I was saying earlier, people are becoming transparent about it now because the stigma is going away. People are realizing this is a necessity and not just somebody taking it for performance enhancing or aesthetic, needs.
That's why that's why I asked you that question, is because people hear, even when I talk about it openly, people are like, oh, I don't want to go on steroids. Like, listen, it's not the same thing. Like, I don't even know what the proper dose is for like a regular steroid cycle for a bodybuilder. That's why I asked you that question.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted you to explain, like, what would, if you're a professional bodybuilder, how much testosterone or testosterone-based stuff are you taking versus what you would be on HRT?
Yeah, so great question. And obviously a lot of this is subjective, right? This is because everybody's cycle is a little different. Everybody does different things. Usually what I see for my patient population, we're between 120 milligrams and 200 milligrams a week, right? That's usually a safe range, but the biggest thing to note is everybody is different, right? The way you metabolize it, how low you're at baseline, and the way that your body's going to aromatase, right? Convert it into estrogen. Where, I mean, I get, and I specialize in a lot of people that are now in their 40s, 50s that abused it in their 20s. And they're like, listen, I just want to do it the right way now. I'm like, all right, well, what were you taking, before? They're like, I was taking between 400 and 600 milligrams of cypionate, plus I was cycling tren, every 3 months with that as well too. And then I would do, if I had any joint issues, I would start doing some Anavar also. And I'm like, you understand that like your red blood cells are probably through the roof. You're putting a lot of extra strain on your heart too, because you look at some of these old bodybuilders, right? Mr. Olympia, ones that really did push the limit back in the 80s, 90s, and then they're dying of heart attacks, right? Because that's something that's going to take place over time, because as the heart works harder, it's just another muscle, it's going to get thicker. And as the heart gets thicker, it can't pump blood effectively out of the heart, right? So that's a big issue with abusing testosterone and other growth hormone and other steroids, stuff like that. So crazy, right?
No, it is crazy. And I'm like, so that's why I say, like, when people are like, oh no, it's like being on hormone replacement therapy is cheating, or it's steroids or whatever. Like, no, like I just want everybody out there to know, like, it is completely different. Like, especially, I used to think it was the same thing too, and then like I am immersed in that world now, like on both sides. Like, I see what goes on, and like I'm gonna tell you, it's not even close to being the same thing. Being on hormone replacement therapy is like keeping you at normal levels where you should be at all times. Being on recreational, like monitored use is something that's completely different.
Well, I mean, you could just, if you look at just medical research and everything, it's becoming widely accepted throughout the medical community, right? Like when I first started doing this 7 years ago, it was really just, practices like my own doing it, maybe a primary care doctor here and there, right? But now I know endocrinologists, urologists, cardiologists, primary care docs, and then integrative medicine specialists like myself that are all doing this, right? So now you're getting recognized across many other specialties, right? Because people are seeing the benefit that it has, on a lot of different reasons, I
mean, that leads me into my next thing. How did you decide that this is what you wanted to do? Like, I mean, out of all the types of things, especially like back when you started doing it, nobody was doing it. So how did you decide that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a physician assistant by my education, and when I first got my start, I was doing a lot of surgery, right? So I've done trauma surgery for pretty much my entire career. I just put that on hold because of how busy Coastal has become. But during that time, I was also doing general surgery, vascular surgery, plastics, colorectal, breast, you name it, we were doing it, right? And especially in the vascular space, you're dealing with so many people that it's already kind of too far gone. We're doing amputations on people now, right? Because they were poorly controlled diabetics. Their life got away from them. And then, this is the end result. So to work in a bit of a more proactive space, I took a job in, doing what I'm doing now between, HRT, peptide therapy, IV vitamins, things like that. And I was like, wow, these people like coming in and they're looking to get better, right? They're not just looking for an easy fix. They're not looking for me to correct an issue. They're looking to increase vitality, increase longevity. So I was like, this is actually very rewarding for me, right? So, and my wife, she's a PA also. She's with us at the practice, and she shares a very similar mindset to it. So, just to get even more into it, I was doing all this work for a long time, and I had one of my cousins actually very, very close to me. He was my mentor. He was 10 years older than me, and he's like, Justin, you're like, you got this great, you got a great following, things are going awesome. He's like, this is what you should be doing, and this is how we could reach more people doing it and things like that. So, because I was taking care of him. He actually had esophageal cancer at the time, and we spent a lot of time together because I was doing IV vitamin hydration, during his cancer treatments. And I was like, this should be access to more people. How do we get this out there? And he's like, Justin, you got everything. Like, you have to make it happen. And an opportunity arose, and it was a space that I wanted to fill, right? Because we recognized that people aren't looking at medicine the right way, right? The right care isn't accessible to the right people that want to do something about it. It's either not cost effective, it's not located near them, or there's not the right specialists in the area for them to actually see, right? So I'm like, I have an idea that I could actually have a comprehensive approach, right? Not just focusing on weight loss, not just focusing on HRT, right? Take the whole person into account, put it in one office, one visit, make it super easy for patients to be held accountable, right? Because that's what people love. They love somebody cheering for them and, holding them to what they're supposed to do, and then also overseeing them. So, and God bless him. He unfortunately wound up passing away at the same time that we were opening. It was really tough, but he was a big part of my motivation into filling this space, So that's why we've made it our whole mission now to be able to help people that want to get help. Yeah. Right. And that's, I think, something that really is different when you take a step back and look at medicine. A lot of medicine is reactionary, right? It's not preventative. It's not mindset. It's not education, right? Where this is like, how do I change your life overall for the better? And that's, when we saw how rewarding that could be, that's when we're like, yeah, we need to keep going with this.
What was the first Coastal MD that you started?
It was in Bayshore, actually. We were subletting a space actually in another office, and we were just seeing a couple of patients here and there, and that office wound up not working out because they were getting bought out by a larger entity, so we couldn't share the space anymore. So we wound up moving up to Port Jeff, which is a bit of a hike. Maintained our following, and then within a year we had Bohemia. Which is now our flagship office. And then within a year of that, we had Melville. Actually, I'd say within 8 months, we had Melville. And then now this April, we're going to be opening up out in Riverhead to serve the East End. Because you talk about
so far from me.
well, I will say I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we do have something coming up in Mineola that is very promising. But I know that there's a big need in Nassau County, and especially for a lot of city guys, because I'm getting people from Yonkers, Westchester, Orange County coming all the way to Melville.
Wow, that's crazy. No, me too. Melville's the closest one, so that's where I go. And it's wild. Is another guy I work with, Chris? He's the one who recommended. He's like, hey, listen, I heard about this place called Coastal MD, and then I looked you guys up, and then I saw other people who were following you, and Justin Francis, who I know is like,
oh yeah.
So like I know him for a long time too, and I saw other people on this. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Listen, because there's a whole other thing, right? So being in law enforcement is just a whole other thing. So where other people who work in the private sector probably don't have to worry about certain things, like we want to make sure that we're going to go someplace that is going to do things correctly, so that we do not get fucked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've seen it firsthand too. And I want to go back to Justin too, because we're actually doing a pretty cool project with him right now. Okay. And I don't know if you're doing that wellness event that they have coming up or whatever, but So I mean, we're helping him out with that too. But just to go back to what you were saying, you have to do things the right way. And what I tell everybody, right, because we treat a lot of law enforcement and a lot of other unions too, right? If you're in a union, you're usually held to a pretty high standard as far as with your employer and everything, right? And their job is to protect you, right? So my job is to also look out for you. And the best way to do that is through documentation, right? And I was at a different practice in the past, and there was a patient who, a police officer, not NYPD, but other law enforcement, and he wound up testing positive on a drug test for testosterone use, right? Very well controlled, not even that high. I think he was like in the 600-700s, nothing absurd. But he had test positive for some of the metabolites of supplementing, and the documentation wasn't in order. He was out for months without pay, he wound up keeping his job, but because of that, that's why I have a strict, I need to see you once a month.
Yeah.
If you ever got in trouble, you go, hey, Justin, I pop positive on this test. They need to speak with you. Okay, here's the last X amount of months of your very well documented blood work, my dosing, checking in on your symptoms, and how you're being managed by a true medical team that's attending to your needs. Like, that's huge.
No, I love that. And like, I wish that this is what I said, like Melville is just so far. I have to like adjust my tour to like come there. I would come every week. Yeah. And like they offer every week to come. And like, I wish that I could come every week because I like to take it. I'm the type of person, if I'm going there, if it's like included, I want to take advantage of absolutely everything that's involved just to, to be my best overall self. But like I said, cops are afraid. Even in my agency, they passed a thing. They're like, if you're on any type of hormone replacement or growth hormone or whatever it is, you have to notify us, right? So at first I was going to be like, I'm not telling them anything. And like, if you don't want to, don't. That's fine. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell them, and then if they tell me no, I can't take it, I'm going to sue them.
Because I want to hear your stance on all this, because obviously this is affecting us as well too. Because we're getting patients coming in, saying like, "Hey, Justin, like, should I have this letter? Should I submit it?" I'm like, listen, you have to do whatever your supervisors and the people who look out for you with your union tell you to do. I will say, like in my experience, that I know the MTA, like LIRR, they have a similar standard, but it's spread out, not just for testosterone. It's for like literally anything. You take an Advil, you take a Benadryl, you take anything, you need to report it prior to your shift work. And I was talking to somebody about it, and they're like, yeah, well, there's actually a state law, which I'm going to look into the law and I'll text it to you. That they're responsible for other people's lives, so that's why HIPAA kind of goes out of the window a little bit. And I'm wondering if that's a similar take with you. But I wanted to get your stance on what that looks like for the future for you guys also.
So I talk to people, and people are very skeptical to tell the agency anything because, listen, at the end of the day, the agency's got to look out for the agency, and that is what it is, and that goes for any law enforcement, even private sector, whatever. So they came out with this edict saying like, okay, if you're on hormone replacement therapy, you have to tell us, etc. But now to go backtrack, the old policy was that if you go down for a drug test and you're on any medications, you have to disclose it. Obviously, I would anyway, and I have. Yeah. Ever since I've been on hormone replacement therapy, I have disclosed what I've been on. Never been an issue. The biggest issue that I've heard from maybe other people is they're like, hey, you said that you were on hormone replacement therapy. Just have the doctor send us a letter saying whatever. Boom, they mail it over. No big deal. Nothing happens. So when this came out, people thought that there was like a really big change. And I said, listen, take it as you want. It's very vaguely written. If you want to... If your notification is like when you go for a drug test, you're telling them what you're on, hey, fine. But for me, especially working where I work in the health and wellness section. I'm under I'm in the public eye. Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, if I don't let them know, I'm going to let them know and find out how it goes. Yeah. So I called them up. I was like, hey, listen, I have to tell, it was a civilian employee who the doctor wasn't in. So I was like, hey, listen, I have to notify my doctor that I'm on hormone replacement therapy. They're like, okay, what district are you? I didn't even know because I try not to go sick that much. But he's like, okay, it's Dr. So-and-so. He's in at 6 a.m. I'm like, okay, I'll come in tomorrow. I'm like, no, you don't need to come in. He'll call you tomorrow morning. Okay. I had to get up early in the morning, help my wife and the kids get ready for school that morning. Of course. So I get a phone call at like 6:30. It's this doctor. He's like, hey, how's it going? You called you called the office to notify me you're on hormone replacement therapy. I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, well, okay. Do you know why you're on it? I'm like, oh, because I have hypogonadism, all this stuff. Yep. He's like, oh, okay. All right, I noted it in your file. I'm like, that's it? He's like, yeah, that's it. I'm like,
how long ago was this? Just curious.
This was about, I want to say, as soon as, it was literally the week after the thing came out. So I want to say it was like 2 months ago. Yeah. So now, I know other guys who are skeptical, so I tell them that story just so so it eases their mind, so they're not afraid to make sure that they do the right thing. Because the last thing I want to do is see guys get in trouble, see guys get fired for doing something that they should be doing. You know what I mean? Like, this is something you should be able to feel your best. You should be able to operate at your best. And to be honest with you, the agency should want that from you. They should want that from their employees to be the best that they could possibly be. Because imagine you have somebody who's in law enforcement who isn't at the right levels, who's depressed, not taking care of themselves, they're gaining weight, they're miserable, they're upset. How are they going to deal with the public, right? Yep. And it all comes into factor with each other. So they should want people feeling their best and doing their best. And then the other part of that was about supplements, right? So essentially what it was saying was it gave a list of certifications. It was like certified for sport. There was another one. I can't remember all of them, right? People thought that this changed from previous. It wasn't. The supplement policy in the NYPD was always everything that you take is take at your own risk. Make sure that, you're taking it from a reputable company, and that's why they give these certifications, third-party testing, all this other stuff. And I got to be honest, and for everybody listening out there, and this is working in the health and wellness section, this is my number one question is about supplements. Always. What supplements can I take? What am I allowed to take from the NYPD? The truth is, the NYPD or any agency is never going to third-party test every supplement for you. It would cost them billions of dollars to do that. It's just never going to happen. So they're not going to take the liability on themselves. That's why they're putting the liability on you, just being like, whatever. But the biggest reason that this exists is because cops lie about shit that they take. And I want to be abundantly clear. I have known people that I have worked with who swore they tested out for supplements, but tested out for weed. Okay. And I'm being dead serious when I say that. So just know that cops lie. They say that they're taking supplements, but they're taking other shit that they don't think they're going to. SARMs, all this other stuff.
Yes.
Listen, SARMs is a big one. Also made in your bathtub. Don't fucking get involved with that shit, okay?
Yes. Thank you for saying it so I don't have to say
it. No, but you could continue about SARMs.
I'm very against them.
Yeah.
Just the way that they're made, the way that they're regulated, and there's no oversight usually of them, right?
No.
Because there's no doctors writing them, right? So there's no medical management following them. That's the biggest thing, right? But I want to jump on what you just said too, and really classify, how I'm like, listen, I want to see you once a month. Well, the other reason I do that is because some people think that it's okay. Like, oh, I'll go for one appointment and I'll show up in like 3-4 months. I'll do my own thing in between.
Oh, no.
And
I'm sure people do it though. Yeah.
And it's widespread. It's not, it's not one law enforcement. It's not even just law enforcement. It's, people in general, and I'm like, listen, dude, I could tell, I give you your medication here in my office. I administer it myself and I give you your take home. I know what you should have and I know where you should be. When you're testing off the charts, that's not for me.
Exactly.
So that's something, and I'm glad that you recognize it also, because those are the people that we want to try and help, right? I can get you feeling just as good on a healthy dose, right? Because you always want to use the least amount of medication possible to achieve the most amount of benefit, right? Really mitigate all of your side effects and extra risk that you're inheriting by taking it. So if we could reach more of those people, that's what I want to serve to do, because doing it the way they're doing it now is not going to help them in the long run.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I know you're trying to reach people. So for those of you who don't know, he's one of the main reasons I started back up this podcast. I get approached every once in a while from people that I know being like, hey, when are you starting up the podcast? But it wasn't until you guys reached out to me and was like, hey, I saw you have a podcast.
Yeah.
What? I'm like, I don't have one, but I'll put you in contact. And then I got to thinking about it. I told my wife. She's like, maybe you should start that up again. I'm like, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should. So that's why you're guest number 2. I was like, my buddy Nick, who I've known for years, was number 1, and you guys were definitely number 2. And I'm sure I'll have you in here again to talk about this stuff, because I think it's very important to talk about this foundational health type stuff, especially with the stigma surrounding it. And like I said, especially in law enforcement where, listen, people lie. If anybody out there is listening and they remember the NYPD, they remember the very, very first anti-supplement list that came out around 2017, 2018, because I remember it specifically. And the things that they banned on there, like even when they came out with the list, didn't even exist anymore. Essentially what happened was a bunch of executives who no longer work there, when they did work there, they got caught up in a scandal.
Oh.
Yeah. And what happened was they were like, I wasn't taking this. What I was taking was all this stuff. So everything that they listed is the stuff that they listed. Because I don't think at that point they were testing for steroids at all, the NYPD. And I think they evolved and transitioned into testing like shortly thereafter.
Okay.
But they blamed the supplements, and which obviously was not true. But they're like, okay, well, don't take these 30 supplements that we list here. But then at the very bottom, this is not an all-inclusive list. Everything you take is at your own risk. That's why I said nothing has really ever evolved or changed. They just changed the wording when they put out this new thing. So for anybody out there who's listening, who's a member of the NYPD, that's essentially what they mean. Everything's take at your own risk. And listen, being involved in this world, I can speak to you. There are, listen, you go to GNC, you go to a reputable company that's third-party tested, that's good. you'll know. You'll know if you are buying it out of the back of a pickup truck. Okay,
your buddy's gym bag, right? That's
your buddy's gym bag.
Yep.
There was this guy when I worked in Long Island City. He had his own protein company. I think it was called like Mr. Gains, and it was like the worst label I ever saw. And he was just like flexing on the label. Like, don't take that. Don't take that. Okay, but especially with these days and with social media and how quick one bad thing can like ruin your whole company.
Oh yeah.
Companies are not going to do that. Like for the most, listen.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's that 1% of people.
Yep.
Like we all know about like Blackstone Labs and like the shit that they were doing, and that's why a couple people went to jail over it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, and listen, you could look at Blackstone Labs and be like, well, dude, like it looks shady to me, and I'm like, I'm gonna stay away from those people. You know, like
common sense, right?
Use common sense.
Yeah, and you know, as a whole, that's really what we do. A lot of stuff too is like we got to just get people back to basics, right? Moving properly, getting their hormones in the right level, addressing like dietary needs and concerns. You know what I mean? So you know, weight loss is a big component to a lot of
I was
this.
gonna ask you about that next.
Yeah, because I think it ties into what you're talking about too. Because remember we were talking about, you know, like where do certain people fall? How are they certain? You know, how do you know that this is right for you, kind of thing? Obesity and type 2 diabetes are one of the they're 1 and 2 for like some of the biggest influences to lower testosterone, right? Yeah. So adipose tissue fat just robs your body of testosterone, you know. So that's why you correct the obesity, you correct the weight, then you're usually going to come back up a little bit on your tests too.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So like, let's say I'm somebody who's obese, right? And I start taking testosterone replacement therapy, and then I start losing weight. Does my testosterone level like almost like sometimes like get elevated on its own naturally on top? Yeah. Okay. I was just curious because me as a guy, so I'll give you an example. So when I first started coming, my levels were like around 600, right? Yeah. And then like same dose, sometimes they'll just be like higher when I come in on the same. It's like it's just weird to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's ebbs and flows, right, with the testosterone, right? There is a peak and kind of a slow descend with it. But a great example, right, a patient that I could actually present to you, never